I'm Martin Seck. I'm 52 years old. I started training in martial arts in 1975. I'm a senior professor in the art of American Kempo Karate, and that's kind of what led me to the bladesmithing portion of it. I want to recreate ancient martial arts weaponry. It just kind of goes hand in hand.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Sizzling Arrow podcast. We are back with episode number 3. We've got Shakia and a special guest with us today, Martin Seck. And Martin is a lifelong martial artist, a traditional archer, and a blacksmith who has been on Forged in Fire. So we're very excited to learn about what Martin does and how he kind of got started with everything. And, Martin, thank you for being here with us, and really appreciate you joining us today. Why don't you go ahead and just kind of start off with telling us a little bit about yourself, some interesting facts, and kind of a backstory, if you would.
Sure. So, as you mentioned, lifelong martial artist. I started training in 1975. So, date myself a little bit, age-wise there. But I used to own 2 commercial karate schools and did that for a long time. I fought in the 1984 U.S. Open.
Nice.
So you might say I'm the original Karate Kid. I don't think I was 16 then. And started working in the cable industry. I'm a corporate trainer. Been doing that for over 20 years.
Okay.
About 25 years in that business. But in regard to martial arts, blacksmithing, and such, started getting into that. Kind of the blacksmithing after we relocated back up to North Carolina. And yeah, that's pretty much the basics to start with. Lived all over the country, East Coast, that's the type of thing.
Okay, very nice, very nice. So how long have you been in North Carolina now?
I've been back in North Carolina since 2009, but I originally lived here from 2003 to 6, and then went through a divorce, moved back to Florida, came back up here in 2009, been back since.
Okay.
Love
Very
it here.
Cool. Nice. Yeah, no, it's great. I've been here since 2007. So graduated from the Culinary Institute up in Hyde Park, New York, and then moved down here. Then moved to Chapel Hill of all places, and then moved out to Graham, and then to Cary is where we're at now. So yeah, don't think I'll ever move. I mean, we got, beach and mountains and country and city, and I mean everything you could really want here in North Carolina. I mean, Cary is getting a little busier than I'd like it, but it is what it is.
Yeah, we were living in Cary recently, and about a year and a half ago, we decided to move to our quote unquote forever home. So we're in the Clayton, Garner, Willow Springs area now. Kind of, I jokingly call it country light. Like my wife, we live in Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Just kind of country light.
Yeah.
We got the country behind me is an old game trail. We get turkey and deer and all that all the time behind us.
Nice.
And I mean, it's a little bit far of a drive for work, but we love it out here. I wouldn't change it.
That's awesome. Well, the one thing I found with the driving, and I'm sure Shakia can attest to this too, if you drive any amount for work, it's nice to have that little bit of commute to unwind before you get home and tackle the, I guess, adulting things or, just home projects or whatever it might be. So it's always nice to have a little bit of a downtime before you get home. So
yeah, decompression.
Yes, exactly. Well, very cool. So, with the blacksmithing and everything, that's one thing that I've really have a big interest in because I'm a big fan of knives. Doing what I do, chefing, hunting, knives are a big aspect of what we do, and it's an important tool that we keep in our toolbox, I guess you could say. But before we kind of get into the whole blacksmithing thing, I want to kind of hit on Forged in Fire. So you were on which season of Forged in Fire was it?
I'm on season 8, which is currently on Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, History Channel, etc. My episode is called Fire and Water. So based on the platform that you're looking for, it's going to be either episode 21 or 22. They had an issue with episode number 1 that there was some stuff that accidentally got aired that they had to remove it. So that changed the dynamic of how the episodes were numbered later on.
Okay.
but formerly it was episode 22. So if you go to the History Channel, I'm actually the thumbnail. You see, I'm leaning in, measuring the weapon, long gray ponytail, so you know it's me. But yeah, it's 21, I believe, on Netflix. But if you look for Fire and Water, that's the episode. And it was called Fire and Water because in the history of the show, we were the only group of bladesmiths that were required to do a water quench. So we walked out there, we saw fish tanks, there was no oil drum, and my heart sank a little bit. I got to be honest with you. I said, "Oh my God, we're doing a water quench today." So
Wow.
wasn't too prepared for that, but made for good TV.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. So yeah, I'm guilty. I haven't had an opportunity to watch the episode yet, but that's going to be on my to-do for this weekend. I really want to see everything that goes on with that. So can you explain to our listeners a little bit about what a water quench is?
Sure. So depending on the type of steel that you have, usually the higher carbon content steel requires a faster quench.
Mhm.
So what we'll do as a bladesmith, trying to get we want a hard steel, then we were going to temper it back a little bit so that we take some of the hardness away so the weapon just doesn't shatter. But we want to have that good edge, especially, if you're using it to process an animal or, in cooking stuff, we want to have that nice edge that maintains that category. So we want to get it as hard as we can first and then pull that hardness out a little bit with a temper process. So based on the type of steel that you are working with, if you know what it is, sometimes we'll work with unknown steels. You want to have a faster type quench. So usually we use Parks 50, which is a fast quench oil.
Okay.
However, our ancestors using iron and things like that necessarily wouldn't get as hard as a high carbon steel did quench in water, or you'll hear stories about Vikings quenching in snow and stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
So, and it was basically needed to get that hardness into the weapon. So there's a technique to do it correctly. And depending on the heat of the steel when you put it in the water is kind of what kind of result you're going to get.
Interesting.
And correct me if I'm wrong, when you're quenching, you actually take the steel and you have to dip it, usually in oil, right? And that's when like you say, you got to put the hardness in there or you reduce the hardness. And in your episode, you had to dip it in water.
Correct. That's right. So you heat the blade up to what's going to be called non-magnetic. So
Wow.
one of the things we check, and that's probably 1,500 to 2,000 degrees is right where non-magnetic is.
Yikes.
So my anvil, I have a little magnet and I touch it to the magnet. And when it doesn't stick, I know it's ready to be put into the oil because I'm only using oil at the house. And then it's no trouble at all. So on the show, I decided, now typically what they do is I know they have these tests and they're gonna abuse the stuff that we're making. And when we all had our own trailers and we got to meet with the judges and stuff before the show, and Jay Nielsen came out and was talking to us all, and he said, "Hey, we know on Forge and Fire, you're not going to make your best knife. You're under time constraints. You've got a particular type of unknown process that you're going to be working with. You're going to do your best that you can in 3 hours. It's going to be a challenge, etc." One of the things that kind of I found trouble with was with the set lights that were on, plus 4 triple burner forges going on at the same time. It fooled your eye into the color of the steel. So what you're looking for is like this reddish color. You really don't want it to be orange yet, but if it starts to get into the orange or even yellow is a no-go for quench. It's too hot. What I decided to do was I was going to do an edge quench. So I grabbed the weapon and I was going to do like a crescent moon edge quench. So that way only the edge would be hard. And if they hit it on something, the spine would be soft enough that maybe it would bend, but it wouldn't break. So I don't want to give any spoilers to those that are going to go watch the episode, but that was my plan. And that's kind of what we did there. So yeah, it quenches it super, super fast. They've never done a water quench since, and they never did one before, and with good reason. So in the first round, we all cracked our weapons. So
Oh, wow.
I will say that. And it was rough. She's seen the episode, but it was tough.
Wow, that's really cool. I can't wait to see it and give it a watch. I think that would be the family movie night tonight. Is we're gonna watch that.
There you go.
So with the quenching, just real quick, and this probably shows my ignorance a little bit. So practically, it's when you quench it, it just shocks the blade. Practically, right? Is that kind of the meaning for it, or
Similar. So we do something called normalization or thermal cycling first. So when you put the steel into fire, it starts to the molecular structure of the steel starts to change. They're bouncing around, they get excited, so to speak.
Okay.
And we need to normalize that. So especially if we've modified the steel, like, I've made multiple layered Damascus weapons.
Okay.
When you're doing that, you've got layers, 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 layers. Well, I want to and it's different steel types. So you want to get them all kind of gelling together. So you heat it up, take it out, you normalize it, thermal cycle it, whatever you have time to do. And by letting it cool down that way, the molecular structure, the grain tightens up. And if you were able to separate it, you would see that a proper grain structure looks like velvet. Okay. Whereas a poorly done process, it would look more like sand. So you're looking for this velvet, although you can't see it. It's kind of you got to say a prayer and hope that it worked. You don't know unless it breaks, and then you go, oh, okay, yeah, that's my heat treat was off.
Yeah.
But, so when you heat it up non-magnetic, they're still kind of excited, but you've done some thermal cycling up to this point, so they're kind of gelling a little bit together. And then when you rapidly cool it, they kind of contract to the space that they're supposed to be in. They try to fall in line, and that makes the steel hard.
Okay, very cool. Yeah, I had no idea on that. And I just use them. I don't make them. So
I've got some sun coming in over here.
There you go. So, when you're talking about the Damascus, so I grabbed these just for a little bit later on, but this is the chef's knife. That is the Damascus steel that he was talking about. But I mean, they're gorgeous looking knives. And, but with that, so with being on Forged in Fire, making the knives for some time now, what got you interested in blacksmithing? That's really what I'm curious about.
Sure. So always been into bows. So it starts with bows first. Okay. And as you mentioned, I'm an avid traditional archer. I see you got a Martin archery hat on, so I appreciate that. And those are my favorite bows, in fact. So they changed to Damon Howitt years ago, but I own a 1972 Bandito recurve that is my primary shooter, and I shoot only custom arrows through it that I happen to trade for a knife that I made for a guy who no longer makes arrows, but if you got something he'll trade with, he came out of retirement to make me some arrows, and I traded him a really nice deer skinner.
Cool.
He's a hunter as well. So anyway, my wife and her family go to a place called the John C. Campbell Folk School, which is in Brasstown, North Carolina. It's about as far northwest as you can get in the state, Appalachian Mountains and stuff like that. So we decided that I was going to go with them this trip. And my wife and I, at the time we were recently married. This is my second marriage. And I decided I was going to take a longbow making class because, I just was fascinated with that process. I wanted to learn how to make a bow from scratch. Thought it'd be a cool skill set to know. So when you go to the community meals, you're all wearing a little name tag and it says what class you're taking and this and that. And they encourage you to sit with people that are not in your class. So you just kind of get to know some folks that are also there, for different crafts and such.
Very cool.
So I happened to be sitting at a table with the blacksmith instructor. And he asked me how the bow class was going. And I told him I was really enjoying it. And he said, and Forged in Fire at this point had been on TV. So I had seen it, but it was relatively new. And he said, would you mind bringing me, do you have any extra string? We're at the blacksmith shop. It was an advanced class where they were making locks and keys and things like that. And he asked me if I'd bring him some string. So I said, yeah, I'll do that. Cause I was kind of curious to see what had going on down there. So I go to the blacksmith shop, give him the string, and I'm watching these guys do this cool stuff with fire and hammer and anvils and things like that. And he says, hold on a second. I want to do something for you. So he takes out a piece of steel, little round stock, about, looks like a ballpoint pen or something, puts it in the fire, and proceeds over the next 15, 20 minutes to take this cylinder and then forge me 2 arrowheads out of it.
Oh, nice.
And it blew my mind, like watching the process, watching everything he did, the skill of moving the tongs and the hammer, and with his knowledge to, shape this completely different object from something that he started with. I said, I got to do it.
Yeah.
So we went 5 or 6 more times to the folk school, and I took every time after that, I took a week-long blacksmithing course. And it's kind of funny. The first course I was in, I was terrible. It was so hard. I'm thinking, man, I'm kind of pretty strong guy. I'm hitting this thing as hard as I can, thinking the brute force is what's going to make this work instead of finesse and skill.
Mm-hmm.
And the instructor said, we had to do an introduction on the first day. So what are your goals? Now, remember, I haven't even hit any steel yet. I'm not heated up any steel.
Mm-hmm.
Said, my goals is to recreate ancient martial art weaponry. And one day I'm going to be on Forged in Fire. And everybody laughed and he laughed. Well, long story short, a couple years later, I was on Forged in Fire recreating ancient martial art weaponry.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when you have something that you are passionate about and you want to accomplish, and you just put your head down and go after it, man, and anything can happen. That's awesome. That's awesome that you did what you said you were going to do. That's great.
Yeah.
So, guys, give me 1 second. I'm just going to go in. My daughter just poked her head in. She's starving, apparently. So I'm going to go and make her a little thing of oatmeal, and I'll be right back. So if you guys want to just chat among yourselves real quick, I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Sure.
I like your background there, Martin.
Yeah, thanks. I moved out of the sun. The sun was coming in, and it was a little. I figured, can I just bear it or whatever? And I was like, no, there's a little bit.
Yeah.
This is a family antique heirloom piece.
It's awesome.
So from 1809, a little German deal there.
That's awesome. That's great.
Got it from my parents when my mom's in a nursing home and my dad's living in a smaller place, and we ended up. They said, well, what do you want? I'm like, well, I definitely, we call it the Jesus chest because it's got religious,
it's a
stuff.
Orthodox, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably Roman Catholic.
Oh, okay, Roman Catholic, very nice.
Yeah. So I said, yeah, I want that, because I remember it as a little kid, and it's kind of funny, on the inside door here, my mom kind of put, like, when my grandparents passed, like their little obituary card is laminated inside the door.
Okay.
And then people that she liked, like Perry Como's in there, or stuff like that. She put them inside the Jesus chest. So
nice.
Yeah, it's her thing.
That's cool. That's very good.
So they're still in there. I didn't take them out.
No, that's good. Keep them in there, safekeeping. And, good blessings as well. That's
absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah.
I'll pass it down to my kids, and hopefully they don't sell it.
Yeah. Well, hopefully they'll keep it in as, just family remembrance, and keep that tradition going. That's great. And, I've got some old silver dollars from my granddad that I'll be passing down. Yeah. So he was a collector, and he passed them to me, and I'll be passing them probably to my grandchildren, like just kind of keep that generational skip drop down. And,
sure.
But yeah, it's pretty cool. So
that is cool.
Cool. So we were talking on how you got started into blacksmithing, and you started with bow making. One thing, being an archer myself, and I use the compounds. I don't hunt with the traditional, which one of these days I might. But how is the bow making process? I mean, it's pretty in depth, ain't it? Like it takes a lot of skill to actually make it to where it shoots properly and straight and has good balance and everything, right? Can you kind of walk us through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So basically, you start with what we call a stave, or some people call it a staff, but a stave, I think, is the more proper termination or terminology for it. And you're going to have the belly of the bow and the back of the bow, right? So the belly faces you, the back faces away from you. And what you want to do is have some type of flexible material on the back so that it will allow for the action of shooting the bow. What we did is we had kind of a stave pretty much done, and we laminated some bamboo to the back of it. And then I put a Purple Heart riser on mine as well. And we used a draw knife and a number 50 file. And then over the course of 3 days or so, about 20, over 20 hours, I'd say, just slowly, methodically, getting the shape that we want. And you would look for, obviously you never touch the back once it's laminated, that you don't want to modify. So you pull material from the belly of the bow and through a process that's called tillering to allow the limbs to flex enough where they will not break, but also will get you like a nice draw weight that you want. And most of the traditional bows for hunting, it's you have to have 45 draw at least 28, depending on what your draw is. Mine's about 31 and a half.
Okay.
I got long arms. So I'm pulling 63 or so, or at 31 and a half with most of the bows I'm shooting. And holding that is a little tough. So it's, you get your sight picture, you come up to your sight picture and you pretty much want to release.
Yeah.
I shoot canted. I don't shoot straight up and down. I had an old Navajo friend of mine kind of teach me how to shoot. So, and I'm hitting pie plates at 30 yards with a traditional bow. So I'm doing all right with it.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah. I shoot, when I shoot recurve, I shoot canted too. I can't do the up and down because, if you're straight up and down, the arrow tends to go, fall off the rest and everything. So it's better to have a little bit of a lean to it. But yeah, that's awesome. Like we used to bow fish, like do bow fishing with recurves, and it was it surprised you because we didn't have the reel, so we would shoot and have to go in after the arrows into the creek. So you have the arrow floating, and sometimes you don't know if there's a fish on it or not. And you grab it, and then it starts moving. It scares the crap out of you. But
yeah,
it was a lot of fun, and kind of kept your wits about you as well. So, so kind of going back into the knife making, for you, what makes a good knife? I know what makes a good knife for me. I like having, full tang, good balance, super sharp, strong. But for you, what makes a good knife? What is something that you look for when, I guess, choosing steel, making it, or even if you go out and purchase one?
Sure. Well, I don't purchase them anymore because I can.
I didn't figure so.
So I mean, I do have some nice blades that I've purchased in the past, but when you know how to make one and it's the quality. It's like going, you cook and stuff like that. So you're gonna go get a hamburger at McDonald's, or you're gonna make your own meal. Your meal is gonna be way better, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, and I'm not saying all store-bought knives are bad. It's just it is a different quality. It does take time. When I put 20-25 hours into a blade, it reflects back in the knife.
Yeah.
So I approach it kind of, from a little bit of an artistic side. I end up drawing out the design I want first, kind of playing with symmetry, with the handle position, with the blade orientation. In being a martial artist too, for me, it's about, can I index this quickly? If I decide to make a concealed type blade, design element is very important to me. I have made a few chef knives, but most of my stuff would be considered probably for processing an animal, because I've made, many skinners for folks. Or self-defense, worst case scenario, that type of stuff. So what I'm usually looking for is a decent high carbon steel. Doesn't have to be super high carbon, So I'm looking at like 1084 steel or 80 CRV2. Those are two that I like to use. They're a little bit more forgiving in the heat treat. So because I'm a human being, I'm not a machine. I can't, I don't know exactly I mean, I can kind of get with the temperature, but I'm doing it old school. I'm looking at it with my eye. I'm touching it to a magnet. I don't have a heat treat oven that says, 1450 degrees on it. I'm kind of figuring it out as we go. But when you see a handmade product and you're holding it and looking at it, you know and appreciate that this was made by a craftsman.
Yeah.
And I have a really good customer, local tattoo artist, and I'll bring up blades to him every once in a while. And he was telling one of his other folks that work with him, he's like, man, you see these things online that, because I'll post them on the internet. And he says, but you can't really fully appreciate it until you're holding it in your hand.
Yeah.
And I made a gomai recently, which is 5-layer, different kind of like a 5-layer sandwich, if you want to liken it to something. And I call it the galaxy blade because it ends up looking like a star system. Cool. You with the different steels in it, you could see the nickel coming through, and the high carbon was darker after the heat treat and the etch. And the guy, he wanted a Tanto knife or Tonto, however you want to pronounce it. And it just ended up turning out. I loved it. Most of my knives, I don't want to sell them after I make them. Like I'll make it and say, yeah, I'd really like to keep this one. And then I know it's good.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's awesome. So, the knives that you make, I'm sure that varies on the size and type of knife and how much time you put into it. But on average, let's say if someone wanted just a basic skinning knife, something kind of like this one right here, just a basic deer skinning knife, what would that run if you would make one for?
Typically 400 is what we start at for a blade that size. My wife does all my leather work, and she's phenomenal. The sheath, she does hand tooling. The sheath that she makes are worth a couple $100 in themselves. So you're getting a $400 plus knife with a really high quality sheath that I probably should be charging more for, to be honest.
That's awesome, man. So now, have you ever made any? Because one thing that I'm actually looking for is a meat cleaver. Have you made any of those, or those fairly? I don't want to say easy, but how tough are those to make?
So the difference between a cleaving type blade is the edge geometry for what you're trying to do with that knife. So with a cleaver, you'd want to make sure that your heat treat was on point. Me personally, I would edge quench that because you want a hard edge, but I would want the back to be somewhat flexible, just in case. I mean, you're going through bone and stuff like that. I've not delved into the world of that. I have made an axe, which is kind of the same edge geometry. But there, when you're dealing with something that large, it's kind of a bang for your buck thing. I've got over a year waiting list for blades right now. And most of the time, I kind of want to make what I want to make, and then if you want to buy it, that's cool. I don't really want to take an order per se, but I mean, I will, and I do that.
Yeah.
And I have done that many, many times in the past. For example, the guy that made the arrows for me, he wanted a Skinner, and I drew a design. He wanted the tip to kind of swell up a little bit so you could put his finger there. And, I went over with him and drew stuff and sent it to him, and ended up putting an antler bolster on it. Really nice maple handle that I hand carved, into the shape that we thought would be good. And he loved it. And my wife, of course, made a custom sheath and such. So
very cool.
Buddy of mine in Ocala, Hunter, same thing. I made a really nice blade for him. He's processed many deer with it, loves it. But I kind of work with people too, but I kind of, it's almost like I'd appreciate it if you let me put my little spin on it or my little take on the process, and then you're going to come away with a knife that you are super happy with. It's going to be an heirloom quality piece that you hand down to your family members. I'm proud to put it out there into the world, and you're going to be proud to own it.
So that's awesome. Yeah, I can understand not wanting to take custom orders all the time. I mean, that just becomes a headache in itself. But I was looking at your Facebook page and seeing some of the knives that you've done. You sent me a few pictures of some that you've done, and actually, there's one that you said you're working on for the Kempo karate, right? That you're designing.
That's right. So I'm currently a 7th degree black belt in American Kempo. I think I've 47 plus years in the martial arts at this point in time.
Very
So
cool.
seventh degree is called senior professor. So it's Ed Parker is the founder of American Kempo. He's the guy that introduced Bruce Lee to the world through the Ed Parker's International Tournament in California.
Wow.
He's kind of an icon, known as we called him the father of American karate. He passed in 1990, but we still perpetuate his system and style. And he was in one of the Pink Panther movies with Peter Sellers, the white-haired Hawaiian guy, giant Hawaiian guy, just super cool. But anyone that knows knives will know the name Gil Hibben or Hibben Knives. A pretty famous guy, well known. He's also a 7th or 8th degree black belt in American Kempo. He trained with the founder, Ed Parker himself. And for one of his black belt ranks, he did what we're going to call a thesis knife. And it turned into be what came to be basically called a Kempo knife, or the Kempo knife. And his knife was based on the traditional American Bowie knife.
Okay.
So it's a large blade, very well done. He's a master smith. I mean, with 50, 60 plus years of experience, incredible knife maker. So to kind of pay homage to him, I did have one of my good friends in California. Her name is Lulu Penn. I made her a blade, and she kind of called me the next Gil Hibben, which,
really?
I said, well, I don't know about that, but thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, I appreciated it and thanked her. And so with the Kempo knife, for my 8th degree black belt, my instructor came up and he spent a few days with me, and we basically sat at my dining room table, and he talked about what are my future goals in the martial arts. And I said, well, I would like to eventually become 8th or 9th degree over time. 10th degree is the highest in my system. I don't have aspirations of that. If my instructor's a 10th degree, I feel like that's not achievable for me. 9 is, don't get me wrong, that's 50, 60, 50, 55 years of training. I mean, it's highly respectable still.
Oh, of course.
But I don't feel like a need to, I'm not on my instructor's level. He's at a different level than most people in the arts. And, he knows I've been into the bladesmithing and such. And he asked me, well, let's get a direction for your 8th degree. And we started talking about a Kempo blade for kind of the modern times, a newer version, because Kempo 1 is probably, we're probably talking from the 1970s, is when that blade was created. Yeah. So I kind of took it into different elements of some things that I would get back from customers for feedback, things that I like in a blade. And I'm calling it the MKK1, Modern Kempo Knife number 1. And that'll be the first design of the blade. It feels good in the hand. There's all kinds of symbolism in the blade with numerology, opening and closing bookends in the knife, which Mr. Parker did in his system quite a bit. There's Kempo concepts and principles built into the knife, where if you look at it and you understand Kempo, or I explain it to you, you go, oh man, I didn't even see that.
Yeah.
So pretty cool stuff in that regard. I'm not quite done with the handle, but the blade it's finished. It's heat treated. Paul, you got to see a little preview of that, which is it's not for the general public yet, but it will be probably early March. I'll maybe make an announcement about it to the global Kempo karate community, and this pattern that I've created to utilize with the blade also uses Kempo concepts and principles. And I'm anticipating and hoping that it's well received by the Kempo community. I've also decided that I'm going to limit that particular design to 100. I'm not going to make any more than that. They'll all be numbered. certificate of authenticity. I'll have my thesis, which is number 0, and then there will be 100 made after that. And then I'm either going to change the design or retire that particular blade.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I'm excited to see it come out and have the handle and everything finished on it. I mean, the blade is absolutely gorgeous, and you're all just going to have to follow Martin and make sure that you keep up with him to see what this blade looks like. I know you guys are going to love it. So, but that's really cool, man. I appreciate you sharing that, and I can't wait to see how people perceive it. I want to see how that comes across. I think people are going to love it, man.
I hope so.
But so real quick, since we're talking about the martial arts and Kempo karate, I've dabbled in karate a little bit here and there. When I was a kid, I did Taekwondo, and before COVID, I was doing jiu-jitsu for a little while, and probably going to start another martial arts at some point. Probably in the next year or so. But what got you interested and wanted to kind of pursue your path or career in martial arts?
So it was around the early 1970s, probably 1974. And I was, a smaller kid, skinny. And I remember seeing, Bruce Lee was huge at the time. Chuck Norris was huge at the time. And I don't remember if Bruce Lee had passed away at this point. So, but just recently. And I remember my parents let me stay up, quote unquote, late, which was probably 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock. And I got to see this Bruce Lee movie, which I later found out was called Return of the Dragon, where he fights Chuck Norris at the end of it.
Yeah.
So I go back to school the next day, and I'm probably in 3rd grade or something, or 2nd grade, or maybe 1st even. And I remember telling my friends, I was like, hey, Bruce Lee killed Chuck Norris. Like, I saw it on TV. It really happened. They're, oh, no. I said, no, you don't understand. Like, I saw this. And so it was kind of the, like I said, he was huge back then. And I just saw this little guy doing all this really cool stuff. And I said, man, if he could do it, I could probably do that. And I started talking to my parents about it, and I kind of let it go. And my dad was a hardworking businessman, and I appreciate that now. Like, I leave before dark and I get home at dark. But I understand what he had to do, and the fact that he would then take me to martial arts after he got home from all that. I mean, man, I can't tell you how much I appreciate it.
Yeah, that's awesome.
It's tough to do, but anyway, we went to this college basketball game, and it's probably 1974. And at the halftime break, they had a karate demonstration. And these guys are out there breaking bricks and boards and all that. And I said, man, I didn't know that was even something you could do. So I pushed it a little bit more. My dad did some research, found a martial arts school that had a good reputation. Back then, they weren't on every street corner like now. I mean, we drove 45 minutes one way to get there. My dad was an accountant, so he'd make me do my times tables the whole trip, which I hated.
Yeah.
Like, what's this times this? I'm like, oh, I just want to be at karate right now. I don't want. I'm not trying to do math. Come on.
Yeah.
But then I'd get there and I'd love it, and that's what started my journey. And my instructor, his name is Sam Justice at the time, in Richmond, Virginia, and he still teaches. He's still open to this day. And I brought my son, my son's 25. I brought him to see him. I promoted my son to black belt last year.
Oh, cool.
So I call him like my, Grandmaster Justice is kind of like my son's. I call him karate grandfather.
Yeah.
So it was really cool that he got to meet him. And the fact that his school's been open since, I think, 1968.
That's amazing.
That's incredible. I mean, he's doing something right. He's got Olympic hopefuls at his school right now, since karate's in the Olympics. He's got national champions. We got back in touch around 2004. So I had lost touch with him, but then the beauty of the internet, for it has its positives and negatives, but one of them was I was able to get back in touch with him.
Yeah.
And it was great. So that's kind of what got me into the journey. And then from that point, I mean, I was hooked, and I pretty much never stopped.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, it was funny that you mentioned your dad was the one that took you to karate, and my mom was the one that actually took me to karate, but it was because she wanted to do it. So she was big into karate. She's actually got a couple karate based books published. So I'll send those over to you.
Yeah.
Later on this weekend, and you can check them out. And I think I've got some copies here. I may be able to send a few with Shakia and just let you read through them if you'd like.
Oh, love it. I would love it.
Yeah, so she's I think it's a first degree black belt in Taekwondo. I know hasn't done it for a long time, but she's still very fascinated, interested in the martial arts, and she got me into it, and it's something that it's very zenful, really. It gives you that release, and then also gives you a little chance to get out some aggression and frustrations too. But
yeah
it's a great sport, and if anyone listening has been on the fence of thinking about getting into martial arts, I definitely would go and check it out. It's definitely worth dipping into for sure. Well, Martin, I appreciate you joining us this morning, and giving us some time out of your day to talk about what you do. It's been very fascinating for me. I really enjoy listening to you and learning about your journey and what you do. How can our listeners connect with you, find you, and just kind of keep up with what you're doing?
So the best way to follow me on social media, if you go to pandabearforge.com, it has links to all my social media there. So it's like a panda, like the bear, Panda Bear Forge. There's a few other close things like Bear Forge or Black Bear Forge. That's not me. But Panda Bear Forge has a little winking panda with an anvil for a head. My wife designed the logo. And you'll know because it'll mention Forged in Fire on the Instagram and YouTube and such. And if you want to follow me on my martial arts stuff, that's just my name, Martin Seck, on YouTube. Or if you type Martin Seck and the word Kenpo, Kenpo, online, I think the first thing that comes up is an authentication website that verifies my black belt rank, which you'll be able to see that as well, which is kind of neat. But yeah, pandabearforge.com should get you there. And I try to post weekly at least on Instagram, and just kind of keep those blades out there and kind of what I'm working on. But I do about one blade a month at this point. I'm not retired yet, so I'm not doing any more than that. And I want to put my time, effort, and energy into just one item and not split focus.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's how you know that you're getting the quality of the knives that Martin produces, because he does take his time and has laser focus on just one thing at a time. So that's awesome. Well, again, Thank you very much. And, as always, I hope everyone enjoyed listening to this podcast and enjoyed catching up and figuring out what Martin does and listening to his journey. I know I did, and I know Shakia did as well. As always, if you enjoyed this podcast, make sure you like and subscribe to the podcast, but also the YouTube. Check us out on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok. I mean, we're on all those social media sites. And if you have not done it yet, and check out the website, www.sizzlingarrow.com. And you'll be able to check out the blog, sign up for the free membership there. So, guys, again, thank you very much. I hope you have a great rest of the weekend, and we'll definitely be talking soon. And I'll get those books over to you, and I will put your information in the description of the podcast and in the YouTube description as well.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Shakia.
All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, Martin.
All right.